You might have heard me say in the past that comedy movies are generally not some of my favorite movies. Well, there are exceptions to that, of course. Earlier this year, I believe I did a review of Strange Brew, which was one of my all-time favorite movies ever. And that's a comedy, plain and simple. Stuff like The Big Lebowski, that's really good, and it's one of my favorite movies. Also, this one, Airplane. This is also one of my favorite movies. Yeah, it's made in 1980. It's made by Jim Abrams and Jerry and David Zucker, the comedy team that also later brought you Police Squad on television. And therefore also the Naked Gun movies, or at least the first one, I think. Now, Airplane was like a parody of the Airport movies, which were like disaster movies. The plot of every one of which is to land the plane safely, amidst some kind of crisis. Now, Airplane was a funny movie. But we're actually not going to talk about that movie today. We're going to talk about Airplane 2, the sequel. First thing I gotta say up front about Airplane 2, the sequel, this is not one of my favorite movies. It's not a terrible movie, but I'll get into that. Now, when it came time that the studios wanted to make a sequel to Airplane, because Airplane did really well at the box office, they couldn't get the original directors and writers back. The Zucker brothers and Jim Abrams did not return for the sequel. Instead, they brought in another director who had actually just directed Grease 2. So I guess they figured, well, he's doing that sequel, he should be fine with this sequel. Totally different kinds of movies, but hey, he's our guy. He's a sequel guy. They even titled it The Sequel. Kind of like, poking fun at the fact that there were so many sequels out there. I guess this is 1982, and there's so many sequels like Jaws 2. I think Jaws was on 3 by then. Friday the 13th was probably already at least on part 2 or maybe part 3. Sequels were quite abundant in Hollywood at the time, and so I guess they're kind of making fun of that. But you know what? Actually, this movie suffers from the same thing that all those other sequels that they're making fun of. It suffers from the same things. Like, it's trying too hard to repeat the original movie. Doesn't take the story any further. Well, I guess it does, but I mean, you're talking about a goofy comedy movie that really had had a very, very thin story in the original. And they just do it all over again. And unfortunately, a lot of the jokes are done over again. There's a lot of repetitive stuff in here. Some of them still land, it's like, oh, haha, I remember that joke from the first movie, and that's kind of funny, and whatever. But it made me appreciate the first movie way more than actually like hearing it again in the sequel. Airplane 2, of course, gets a lot of the original actors back here. Robert Hayes is the lead, also Julie Haggerty. They're both fine here. They don't really expand their characters very much. I guess like stuff has like happened to them in the interim between the two movies. Peter Graves returns as the captain. Lloyd Bridges comes back in this one. And even his wisecracking subordinate. He's the flamboyant, bald guy that, basically just makes jokes in the background as all this crazy disaster stuff is going on. He's back. He's pretty funny. Even the jive-talking guy. So they bring that joke back, and it's a little tired and a little bit racist. Unfortunately, Leslie Nielsen didn't return for this, but you do get some new ones in here. You get William Shatner. He has a fairly significant role, really only in the last third of the movie. We get Rip Torn shows up in here. Raymond Burr. Sonny Bono is in this as well. He plays like a terrorist guy or a guy that wants to blow up the plane, carries a bomb on the plane. Yeah, and a few others. And everybody's fine here. Like, it's a comedy. It's not overly hilarious, though. Now, one thing about the story of this movie, which there is a bit of a story, It actually takes place in the future. So this was made in 1982. So the future to them, I guess in the beginning of the movie they kind of set it up that it's near the end of the century sort of thing. It's a flight from Earth to the moon. And the disaster that happens is the computer takes over the ship or malfunctions and sends the, I'm going to call it a ship instead of a plane now, sends the ship into the trajectory towards the sun, to self-destruct or whatever. And they have to override the computer somehow and then make their way back to Earth or the moon. Yeah, so we get some like space jokes and stuff in there. Funny gag where Robert Hayes opens a door that says danger vacuum, and then suddenly like this vacuum cleaner hose comes out and starts attacking them, and I don't know, that one got me. So yeah, there's a couple like space jokes, like they hit asteroids and things like that, and jokes about the computer and stuff like that. So those are really the only differences. Otherwise, you're getting a lot of recycled jokes here, and it seems really weird that a lot of the jokes, like the airport-based jokes that take place in the first 10 minutes of the movie, are the funniest ones and the least repetitive of them. And it's like the first 10, 20 minutes of this movie is pretty funny, I thought, but it really goes downhill in the middle when you realize that they're just repeating the same jokes and they're setting up the same situations. I don't know, it's just meant to be a sequel. It's just a cash grab. I'd hate to say it's bad, because it's not a bad movie, but it's just a lazy movie. There's a few good jokes in here, but compared to Airplane being like 90% funny, this one's about 20 to 30% funny. And so it's a big drop in, the quality of this. Not the budget, but the actual like writing quality and entertainment quality of it. So, the original Airplane, I think I'd probably give it something like, well, I'm not going to even say, but it would be up there. One of my favorite comedy movies ever. This one, however, just didn't work for me this time around. I hadn't seen this since the 80s, I think. I remembered it being funnier than this, but it just wasn't. I'm going to give Airplane 2, the sequel, a C+. C+, because, hey, you tried. It just feels like it refers back to the first movie like too much, and you have to have seen that one to actually get a few of these jokes. But anyway, airplanes and shuttles and spaceships aside, have a good one out there, everybody.